Good morning, Rob. How
Hello,
are you?
Donald.
It's afternoon even.
It is. Yes.
Yeah. How are you doing?
I'm doing fine, thanks. As
Yes,
a
yes.
retired man.
I like that. I like that. Retired man. So I'm gonna read something about you to the listeners,
Hmm?
as follows. Rob Crawford, born in Jamaica, traveled to the UK in 1955 with his mother and sister Jackie. Rob went to a variety of schools, mainly because his father was in the RAF. He attended 5 primary, 2 secondary modern, and 3 grammar schools. Rob has a B.Eng from Liverpool University and a physics MSc degree from North London Poly. He spent 34 years with British Telecommunications, doing a wide variety of jobs, but mainly designing telephone networks, and later years as an IT trainer on speech recognition systems.
Yep.
After escaping the corporate world, Rob spent a couple of years building drones and filming big events, which was much more fun than telephones.
Indeed, it was.
After many years of moving around during his childhood, Rob now enjoyed living in the same home in leafy Hertfordshire for the last 35 years. Thanks to the boomerang generation, he now has a household comprising 3 generations, and having a grandchild in the house keeps him grounded and young in spirit.
It certainly does.
Like that. Fantastic. Excellent. Yes. So, Rob, welcome to the Forgotten Generations.
Thank you.
Interview.
Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah. I always thank people for doing this, because there are a lot of people that I ask and they don't. Especially a visible interview like this, which makes quite a difference in what we do. Yeah. So thank you. I'm just going to go through a series of questions and ask you whatever you want to disclose. It's just a chat, really. So we're going to start off. Can you tell me a bit about your background, where you were born and all that?
Okay. Well, I was born in Jamaica, a place called Halfway Tree. It's a suburb of Kingston, which is where all the music production happens. That's what I've been told, anyway.
Is that right?
Only visited it once back in the 80s with 2 of my sisters and my mum. Yeah, and I was 2 years old when I left Jamaica, so my memories of Jamaica are zero, other than what I've acquired in later life.
All right. So you obviously went back there, like you said, but how kind of age were you then when you went back to Jamaica?
Oh, I was in my mid-30s.
Okay.
Mid-30s, yeah, about 34, I think I was at the time. Yeah, so I was going back to roots, as you do. I'd recently gone through a divorce, and it was sort of like, back to discovering who I am.
Right.
And I went back with my mum and 2 of my sisters.
All right. So in what did you find? How did you find it? Was it something that how you thought it would be, Jamaica, or was
it? I think it was. Yeah, I mean, I'd read a lot about Jamaica, and I've been very political and read up a lot about what had happened to Jamaica since independence. My parents had been back in the 70s. 77, 78, something like that, when it was very, very unstable, politically unstable. And they were quite disturbed by that, But when I went back, it was a great holiday. It was interesting meeting all my mum's peers from when she used to work in the telegraph office in Kingston. She was used to train people on teleprinters.
So that just her peers rather than relatives?
And relatives as well.
Okay.
All aunts and uncles and the whole gamut. I mean, we were traipsed around as you are. But it was just nice to see that Jamaica. Having had it described to me during growing up, And when I was very realistic about it, and it wasn't sort of, it's not Paradise Island. I mean, it's a beautiful place, but having been quite political in my youth and read up a lot about Jamaica and the politics of
Yes.
Caribbean and so on.
Yeah.
I had a much more grounded and realistic view of what to expect, really.
Yes. And depending on how much you travel around, from my experience, because like you, I was born there, gives you a view as to what Jamaica is really like, because there are parts of it that's absolutely beautiful.
Yeah.
And then you get to other parts which, like everywhere else, is not so, it's got its problems. But overall, I think, great. So it's good to hear that you've had that experience, because a lot of people don't ever go back and, to their roots and all that. So it's no point asking you about what was your experience between transitioning from Jamaica to, because you're only 2 years old.
I remember absolutely nothing. I'll be brutally honest with you. But my very first memories as a child were from a little village called Billingford, which is where we were, where we were stationed when my dad basically rejoined the Air Force.
All right. So, and where is that? Which it
was Swanton Morley, RAF Swanton Morley.
Oh, right. Okay. Yes.
In Norfolk, and we were in a little cottage in Billingford. It was like something out of Rise to Candleford, because we're not talking about electricity. We're talking about a well. We're talking about we're talking the full-blown Edwardian or Victorian living, basically.
That's very interesting.
It was very interesting, and I just remember very dark rooms. That's my only image as a child.
And were they cold as well?
I don't know. I just remember very dark rooms, because we had oil lamps and that sort of stuff. I mean, it was very basic. We were there long enough for my sister Heather to be born, and she was born at home.
Oh, right. Okay.
With the assistance of Mrs. Parfitt, who lived around the corner. Which is again pretty basic stuff, and when she was born, very shortly afterwards, as I say in my eulogy later on, Dad was shipped out to Habanya in Iraq. And that's when the family's officer said, right, you've got to move out of this hiring now onto the base, onto the into married quarters.
Oh, right.
So the RAF, stepped up, did the necessary, and Mum was then part of the properly part of the RAF community.
Oh, I see. Which over the years there are several of those moves, weren't they? Going from base to base.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
So as I read in your summary there, you went to quite a few different schools, didn't you?
Yeah, inevitably. I don't know whether it's a function of Dad being part of maintenance units, or whether, I don't know, but we moved every couple of years. Less than a year we'd be somewhere before moving. So adapting to new environments was part of my my whole growing up, basically.
Well, I guess, were you conscious of that, adapting to your environment, or is it something you just did as a child because you move and you just got to get on with it?
Yeah, for me it was the norm. For me that was what growing up was all about. That's what life was about. I didn't know anything else.
Yes.
So it wasn't a question of am I adapting? It was a question of this is life. This is it. We move every few years.
Yeah.
Make new friends, we lose friends.
That's absolutely.
We go to a new school and we just run with it.
It's very much military life, isn't it? Very much part of the military life, isn't it? Really.
Yeah. I mean, as children, you adapt. As children, you just do it. You don't question it. You just get on with it, really.
Is there any particular school that you've got in memory that you really enjoyed over any other?
Wow. I would imagine it has to be my last one, Maidstone Grammar School, where I was in the upper sixth, and I was the guy with the music in the sixth form common room, and that's adolescent, it's first girlfriends, it's all that sort of stuff. So I mean, that's the one that stays with you. Do you know what I mean?
Of course.
And you're more in control when you're in the upper sixth, and you're an adult.
Yeah. So you mentioned grammar school. Then obviously you went to grammar school. So somewhere along the line you had to take some sort of test or something.
Well, that's an interesting one, because both my sister Jackie, my elder sister Jackie, and I both failed our 11+.
All right.
It was a direct result of moving around. If you move, less than a year before you're taking a key exam, you're not prepared for that exam.
Absolutely.
Because normally a year, 18 months, 2 years is needed to prepare you for a particular exam. And we both failed. She went to a secondary modern, Curtin Lindsay in near RAF Hemswell, and they kept her there because she was a good student. And it was good for a secondary modern school to have good students who are going to do, either good, whatever it was, school certificate at the time, or O levels. So it was good kudos for the school. So they didn't transfer her to grammar. Then we moved to RAF St Athan in South Wales, and we went to secondary modern school. And within a year, less than a year, they said, you guys shouldn't be here. And they transferred both myself and Jackie to the local grammar school, Cowbridge. Cowbridge Grammar School for me and Cowbridge High School for my sister, which was, I suppose, our route to, the careers that we wanted to have in the future.
That's interesting. They just say that you shouldn't be there based on the work that you were producing?
Based on less than a year's experience of us in class. They said,
wow,
you guys should be in the grammar school. So they literally transferred us at the end of that year to the local grammar schools, Cowbridge, which was, I take my hats off to them. I mean, the Welsh education system was
excellent.
Was transformative in terms of our lives,
wow.
Because we both then went on to do degrees and etc.
How did you find it at grammar school? Did you fit in just easily, or was it any, much?
Yeah, I mean, like with all the schools I went to and all the senior schools, I was the only black kid, and
as per usual,
you're the only black kid. You get on with it, and that comes with several, pluses and minuses. I mean, there is always the potential for bullying.
Yes.
And I always dealt with that relatively quickly within the first week.
What does that mean? I like that.
You stand up for yourself and nobody touches you ever again. It's interesting, you see, that I was quite good academically.
Right.
People think, well, he's a bit clever. You don't want to mess with him. And I was actually good at sports.
All right.
I at 16, I could do 100 yards in 12.1 seconds or whatever.
Yeah.
And I was good at sports, very good at football. And as a result of that, you get there's this kind of respect going on.
Absolutely.
You're good in class, you get good numbers, and you're good at sports. So people will,
it's respect all round, isn't it? Respect from the teachers, from your
you don't get hassled,
it makes life somewhat easier, I believe.
It does, yeah.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
So after grammar school, then you went to did you go straight to further education?
Yeah, I wanted to be a pilot at one point.
Oh, did you really?
As you do, you're a kid. I was obsessed with hardware, military machinery, armor, aircraft, bombers, fighters, ships, anything to do with that. And I was a post-war kid, okay, and that comes with the territory.
Yes.
So obviously, I wanted to be a pilot, but then I realized that with the eyesight being what it is, that wasn't going to happen.
Okay.
And with Dad encouraging me to take more of an interest in electronics and that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
I moved towards getting a potentially a career in electronic engineering, because I just loved electronics and tinkering with wires and circuit boards and stuff like that.
Which was more like his world, was it?
It was. I mean, he's instruments, but the instruments does include a fair bit of electronics and electrical systems along the way. So I was, he was happy to encourage me in that direction. I mean, he taught me to solder. He taught me how to put a circuit board together neatly.
So you just eased into that world quite readily.
Yeah, it was natural. I mean, I just loved electronics. I love making stuff. I loved, building amplifiers and tape recorders and that sort of stuff. As they were at the time, it was always tape recorders then, of course.
Wow. And both complement, those things complement with music, which you loved anyway.
I was obsessed with rock music, as you are at the time, heroes like Hendrix and so on, and it all sort of gelled because the music and the electronics and the audio, it's and because I used to build my own stuff, I used to have some quite good kit because I build it myself. I'd buy a tape deck and build the amplifiers and the circuitry for it.
Wow.
So yeah,
that's amazing. So what was your first job then, and like who with?
Well, first job was with British Telecommunications, as it was. Oh no, sorry, the Post Office Telecommunications, as it was at the time.
Yes,
which then became British Telecommunications, which became British Telecom, and then became BT. So I was with it through all those transitions. And first job was working in Faraday Buildings in central London, just across the road from St. Paul's.
Okay.
Main communications hub for all telecoms in London. At the time it was. It's got 8-foot thick walls, which was good because the amount of bombing in the centre of London at that, during the war was quite significant. So it was important that it was a pretty resilient building.
Yeah.
What they call junction test centre, where they tested all the main lines out to the periphery of London, places like that.
That must have been quite an experience then, working in a world like that.
It was interesting because I was recruited as a graduate, which was unusual to be in what they call an assistant executive engineer as a graduate.
Wow.
A trainee graduate, and then within 4 months, managing a staff of 36 people.
Really?
A number of whom were in their 60s.
And how old were you then?
To be my granddad.
How old were you then?
I was 21.
Wow.
And it was a conscious policy on the part of the post office at the time to start recruiting younger guys, straight from university, and there were who had been recruited directly rather than coming up through the ranks. Yes. And this put me in charge of 36 hairy-assed engineers.
How did you feel?
There's quite a decision on the part of BT, and they showed, and also being a little young black guy as well.
Yes.
It was interesting.
Yeah. So there must have been oppositions. Is one, and of course the young shoulder that you had to carry these elderly people on is another. So how did you manage those things?
But what's interesting is that I was a full-blown assistant executive engineer. It wasn't a trainee or anything like that. I was managing that trunk test center.
Wow.
The letters, your position gives you a degree of authority.
Oh, yeah, of course.
We're talking old school. We're talking 1974 now, when the BT is going through a major transition from the old electromechanical through to the modern digital environment, and I'm bang in the middle of it. I think at that point I learned how to get the best out of people who were working for me. That's the best way I can put it. Yeah. I had a number of senior technicians. Well, they're called TOAs, or technician with allowance. They were senior guys who'd been around the clock several times.
Yes.
And there was a guy called Sid Thompson who was my he was the guy who really ran the show. He'd been in the RAF during the war, and he'd been bow fighters in the Western Desert. He was an amazing guy. He was an old, hardline old communist.
Yeah, a communist.
Yes, we just had this relationship. Where, we had a great respect for each other, and he was so in tune with that workplace. I knew if I needed to know anything about what's happening down there and what needed to be done, I'd listen to Sid, and then I'd make a management decision one way or another. I wouldn't always agree with him, and I wouldn't always agree with the decision, but with the way he approached it. But the important thing was this guy was very special. He was in tune with that workplace.
So you learned a lot from him then, really?
Sorry,
you learned a lot from him, really?
I learned a hell of a lot from him. 4 years I managed that trunk test center, and Sid Thompson, salt of the earth. You need to listen to people, and that's when I learned to listen to people and reflect, and then make your decision.
Yes, yes.
Everyone has got, as you say, everyone's got a story.
Absolutely, absolutely. And individuals are individuals.
Yeah.
And you've got to manage them according to them as an individual.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's quite a great learning curve, isn't it?
It is. It is.
Yeah. So from all that experience, then you went on to training. Is that right?
Well, I did many different jobs within BT. I mean,
Okay.
I got promoted twice, so I ended up being what's called a head of group and working on or doing consultancy basically for big corporate enterprises, designing call centers for them.
Wow.
I did just about everything along the way, from managing bandwidth allocation on international cable systems, through to well, as I say, designing call centers, through to being the BT's expert on networking, telephone networking code of practice. I had to do various presentations on that. Which was a bit weird.
Yeah.
You find yourself being the one person who knows everything about a particular regulatory issue.
Okay.
Time when we were being privatized, and they were allowing a lot of networking functions to be farmed out to private industry.
Yeah.
That they had to fit in with certain regulations and transmission requirements. So my job was to do public presentations on how the networking code of practice would work, and people would come and listen to me rabbiting on about networks, and there'd be the head of regulation in BT, be the Director General of Oftel, who's responsible for all telecoms in the country.
Wow.
And there'd be me in the middle, Rob Crawford, talking about the networking code of practice. And people in their hundreds came to listen, not to the guy from Oftel and not to the guy from the regulatory unit. They came to listen to how to get their networks through the code of practice, which was technical stuff. And that's what I did.
Wow.
Which is very interesting. It's sort of imposter syndrome, really. I found myself in situations where I thought, this is very strange that I'm here,
Yes.
Because wherever I was in BT, I was the only black face.
Really?
I came across another Afro-Caribbean, was with Leyland Grant, who was Bernie Grant's brother.
Really?
But Bernie Grant, but
yes.
Leyland and I were at the forefront of a dispute in 1984, when we both worked for International Lines branch, and we were both. I was the branch treasurer of the International Lines branch of our management union. He was the chair, and his partner Denise was the secretary. She became the general secretary of our union, by the way, in the end.
Wow.
Of us headed up. They ended up calling us the International Brigade because we were a little bit left, and it was unusual for a management union to be militant in a way, because they were trying to use people like me who had transmission experience to man the exchanges in the international exchanges during this major dispute with BT.
Wow.
And we said no, we don't do the work of the Post Office Engineering Union, because we're a management union. We manage people.
Right.
They were ringing up our members in the middle of the night and saying, come in the morning and get managing those exchanges. Otherwise, don't bother coming into work. It was very heavy.
Really?
That's all I can say.
Wow.
And the reason it happened was because the majority of BT's revenue at the time came from international telephone.
So talking about international, then, did you get to travel with BT?
I did, yeah. Interestingly enough, not when I worked for International Lines and was political, but later on, I did actually work for MOD type projects.
Okay.
And I'll cover the bits which are public domain, which I can talk about. Obviously, you appreciate that, official secrets and all that sort of stuff. But essentially, I think it's public domain to say that BT was doing the feasibility study on a thing called Skynet, which is MOD's external communications, and the BT managed a lot of MOD. Well, at the time, most of MOD's comms. So we were doing a feasibility study on that, and that indeed involved travel, to the States and Cyprus, and that was quite interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, very, very good. That's fantastic. So you left BT, did you?
Yeah, I did. The corporate world got a little bit too American style for me. If I'm brutally honest, it wasn't the old sort of civil service type environment that I joined, and it's I think it was time for a complete change. So I took voluntary redundancy and started working for a company who did speech recognition systems.
Wow.
IT support, but I know very little about IT. I'm a hardware man.
Yeah.
I'm an electronics hardware man. So I did that for a couple of years. It's essentially telling people to turn it off and turn it on again, and then that normally sorts a problem out. But then there was an opening to be an IT trainer, and I've been a consultant and a facilitator for so it was a natural move to get involved in training, and it was very interesting actually. The speech recognition systems they used were absolutely fascinating, very clever things. But it was I suppose it's the Wild West of speech recognition, and now it's become sort of part of everybody's phone.
Absolutely.
So, I won't use the A word because she's behind me. Alexa. But I mean, it's in everybody's house now. But at the time, it was they used it for menu systems on call centers, and I trained people on how to configure them, how to get the best out of them, how to tune them to recognize different words and so on.
That's a fantastic world, isn't it? I mean, so when you're involved at the forefront of new technology like that, new things introducing into the world, it's quite revolutionary, isn't it?
It is. You feel like you're just pushing that envelope out, and it's it is absolutely fascinating.
So when did you get into the drone?
Oh, okay. Well, after about 7 years of training people in NHS sites and and so on how to configure speech rec. It got quite demanding. A lot of travel involved, and I thought, no, time to retire proper. I think so. I thought I'm going to retire proper, which I did do. That because of the sort of person I am, I got a 6-month job with Maplins.
All right.
Growing up as a teenager, I always used to buy my components and bits and pieces from Maplins. And I thought, I just want to see behind the scenes. So I worked at Maplins in Watford for about 6 months. And it was about the time that drones were starting to become popular. Maplins started, selling the latest drones.
So what kind of era was that? What year? What year about was that?
2015, 2014, 2015.
Okay.
It's about the time that drones are people were hearing about them. They're in the news. People were taking an interest in them. And I thought, oh, well, I'll have a little tinker with these. And I just found that building them was absolutely fascinating. There's the amount of technology that goes into getting a drone off the ground is off the scale. It really is.
So can I ask then, is there a particular country that started all of this, the drone?
Well, there's a company called DJI, a Chinese company, which is more or less on the forefront of commercial drones. I'm not talking about military drones here. I'm talking about commercial drones.
Right.
And they still are the ones who are at the forefront. But most of the components I got when I built them from scratch, I got from various Chinese companies, because that's
okay.
And most stuff is manufactured out in China. That's just the way of the world at the moment. And all the various elements of a drone, of which there are many, can all be bought separately, and you can, if you don't know how to configure one, you go onto YouTube. YouTube.
Right. Yes.
Thing you need to know about configuring the flight controller on a drone, and and configuring the video systems as well to get the most out of those.
So that was a business that you went into then with the drone?
I did it for a couple of years.
Yeah.
I did some big events, car events, events where they wanted a big panoramic view of how big the event was, essentially.
Right.
And I would start off with a blank field, and then show them preparing the ground, and then I'd drone them as the event built up to its full, the 2 days it was on or whatever.
Yes.
And then I'd drone them when everything was being taken down. So you got that sort of insight into how the event was put together and so on. It was just a bit of fun, really. They are fascinating bits of kit. And if you're into hardware like I am, it's infinitely interesting, because there's so much to configure and build and tweak, and there isn't the perfect drone. You can always tweak and tune them for different characteristics.
And like everything else, it's meant to be for the betterment of us as people.
Indeed.
But people are using them for all sorts, aren't they?
Anything out there, as long as the military gets hold of it, they'll find some way of using it for nefarious purposes. But that's the way of the world, unfortunately.
But even in the prison world, we hear about the prison world these days.
Oh yes, of course. The drone tends to be used these days, doesn't it, for getting through over the walls and delivering drugs and goodness knows what else, and phones and things to.
So just going back a bit then, for you and your family, with your father being in the military.
Yes.
How was that for you all? I guess it's something that you grew up with and you probably didn't know any different. But he was your father. He was World War II. And then after that, he still was in the Air Force for some time.
He didn't talk at all about his time in the Air Force during the war.
Didn't he?
And you know what? Everything I've learned about him subsequently, and about his experience over here during the last days of the war, last years of the war, and his early RAF days, I've learned from interviews that my sister Heather had with him, and he's just got him talking about his early life, which he'd never talked about with us. My only insight into I didn't have any insight into his World War II experience at all.
Wow.
And the only impact it had on us was that when we were growing up, we used to know all the Caribbean families on site.
Yes.
And we knew all the Caribbean families, and we even kept in touch with them when we moved to different places. My family kept in touch with other Caribbean service personnel.
Interesting. So you mentioned that Heather, did she record an archive?
Yes, she's got 18-page document, which is a summary of all his experience over here while he was in the RAF during the war.
That's fascinating. That's fantastic, because what gave her that sort of insight, I wonder, to just start talking to her dad and recording such thing. That's a great thing to do, because there are a lot of people who you have the same story as yourself as a child or children, where mom or dad don't share their experience, or haven't shared their experience before they pass away. So and to have Heather doing that,
and all that's lost, isn't it?
So for Heather to have done that, I don't know. I'd probably have to speak to her to ask her why she initiated that. Doing that sort of thing, which was fantastic.
You did put a lot of time in. Interestingly enough, my sister Sue, I think, also got involved with some of the interviews as well. She sort of carried on the family tradition in a different way, in that she was an air traffic controller with the RAF.
Yes. I spoke to Sue. Matter of fact, they interviewed Sue as well. Fantastic. So after that, then Dad obviously and his paintings is just amazing. What sort of life journey, what stage did you realize Dad and his actual talent in painting? Was it earlier on or much later on?
I think it was always there, because I think he always painted, but I kind of, once again, you kind of take it for granted. He I'll be brutally honest here, and Dad's probably looking down, he's wagging his finger, but I was never a great fan of Dad's paintings. He was a very formal painter, you know. He loved painting his old masters, which I think were brilliant. His old masters, I think he could have been a forger if he put his mind to it, to be honest. Some of his old masters,
because he's that good, isn't he? He's that good. Yes.
Yeah, his old masters are really something else. But yeah, but he was a very formal painter. And you know, it's a very subjective thing, isn't it? You know,
yes, very much so,
in terms of art and so on. But he was very precise and very good at what he did. But
that
was his nature, you know.
Yeah, and I guess you could tell as well, because from what I've learned in his career in the Air Force, he ended up getting British Empire Medal or something like that for his work with, you know, Phantom aircraft or something like that.
Yeah, I mean on both as part of his day-to-day work. I mean, you know, the fact that he designed the chess set for the Phantom, but beyond that, it's his input into events. You know, he'd make and produce stuff which would be part of events outside of the work environment, if you like. At the mess, you know, at the sergeant's mess, he would do stuff which would which was special, you know.
Yeah.
He had an eye for stuff, and
which was fantastic. And you know, it was absolutely fabulous, fantastic. I know it was a funeral and that, but you know, it was so good to be part of that, to be invited to it, especially as veterans as we did, and to meet yourself and the others, and to also hear the various tributes, especially the one by yourself that you made to your dad that you read out, which, you know, I would like you really to recite that into this interview now, because I was very moved when I heard it, and I'm sure others will be, you know. So would you like to recite?
I'm just going to read it.
Yes, just read it
as I read it on the day.
Yes.
So bear with, okay?
Yes, indeed.
Yeah, I'm just going to give it to you just as I read it on the day. Okay, so good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for being here today to celebrate a life well lived. To celebrate the extraordinary life of my dad, a man who meant so much to us. So I'm going to give you a very personal view of my dad's life. But how do you summarize a lifetime of 101 years, a life that has spanned a period that included the most dramatic changes in humankind, and in particular, technological change, where my dad always seemed to find himself at the cutting edge. But he adapted, took it in his stride, and adapted at every juncture. Now, Dad's journey began in 1923 in Jamaica, where he was born, and it's a journey that has inspired and shaped me and our family and everyone that knew him. He grew up in the little seaside town of Lucy on the northwest coast of Jamaica. And I think his childhood is best summed up in his own words. I was very close to my younger brother, Jimmy. We had lots of playmates in town. I learned to swim when I was 8 to 9 years old, and I was self-taught. We made rafts from wood, tied together with rope. We used to sail around the harbour, up the Q River, and steal sugarcane from the plantation. Now, as a young man, Dad used to repair watches and mechanical things, and when war broke out, Dad saw an opportunity to learn more about instruments, which were his real passion in life. Before joining up, Dad said he knew very little about the RAF, only what he'd seen in war films. He just knew that it was an organisation where he could pursue his interest in instruments. So in 1944, at just 21 years old, Dad joined the RAF, and he set off on a path that wouldn't just take him across the world, but would also define the rest of his career. My dad travelled to the UK aboard the SS Cuba. It was in a convoy, and some of which didn't actually make it due to U-boat activity. He was part of a generation that stepped up during a time of great uncertainty. My sister Heather has gathered a whole heap of information on Dad's wartime reflections on life in Britain for a Caribbean serviceman. It makes amazing reading. But one memory that stands out for me was my dad's experience of British shops. And to quote my dad's own words, I was surprised to see closed doors on shops. Shops are open fronted in Jamaica. It's where the weather is warmer. Now, I remember buying an apple because I'd never tried one before. It was sour, and I nearly spat it out. I'd bought a cooking apple. After the war, he returned to Jamaica to his previous job, but Dad soon got bored doing what he described as a glorified storeman, and he soon applied for a job with de Havilland at Hatfield in the UK. So once again, he found himself working on instruments and got a good basic training at the same time. Dad worked on the first ever jet airline, the iconic de Havilland Comet Mark I. Now, life wasn't always easy, and in 1955, after a number of fatal crashes of the Comet Mark I, Dad was made redundant. So the next day, Dad rejoined the RAF as an instrument technician and sent the £50 signing on bonus to my mum, so that she and my sister Jackie and I come over from Jamaica. This marked the long start of his long career in the RAF. In 1956, my sister Heather was born, and Britain decided to invade Egypt. These are not related events, by the way, but it did mean that Dad was posted to Iraq during the Suez crisis, and poor Mum was left holding the babies for 6 months. But my dad chose well when he married my mother because she was his match in every way. She was smart enough and industrious enough to support Dad during several overseas postings. Due to my dad's trade, our family moved quite frequently around the world, around the UK, and in the first 15 years of Dad's RAF career, our family moved house 10 times. So as you can imagine, my mum was a very resilient and resourceful lady, and the RAF always provided good logistical support, as you would expect. So between 1956 and 1962, we moved house 5 times, and we were stationed at RAF Hemswell, which is at the time, was one of 4 nuclear missile bases in the UK. So we arrived just in time for the Cuban Missile Crisis. Now, my dad's job as an instrument technician was maintenance of the electromechanical guidance system of the Thor nuclear missile. So my dad had to make regular trips to Vandenberg Air Base in the USA to learn how to fix these things. So like it or not, we kids went to a primary school that was about 1 kilometer away from the nuclear missile silos during the Cuban Missile Crisis. Now, luckily, these things are of no concern when you're 10 years old, and especially when your dad keeps bringing back really cool toys from the States. Now, to give some insight into Dad's mischievous side, before the first test flight of one of the Thor missiles that Dad was actually working on, he sneaked a photo of myself, Jackie, and Heather into the guidance bay so that we would be the first kids to have our photos in space. As far as I know, it didn't alter the trajectory of the missile. Now, as overseas postings became few and far between, in 1973, Dad managed to end up on RAF GAN. Now, that's in the Indian Ocean, and he was part of a team maintaining transport aircraft en route to the Far East. Now, as far as I can ascertain, this involved refueling aircraft for 1 hour a day and snorkeling and drinking rum and fresh coconut water for the rest of the time. My dad had truly perfected the art of traveling to exotic places at the MOD's expense. But he still found time to be innovative and creative. His proudest achievement came in 1975 when he was awarded the British Empire Medal for designing a test set for the Artificial Horizon system of Phantom jets. Now, that's a fairly crucial piece of kit. My dad wasn't just the master of his craft, he was a consummate perfectionist who took immense pride in his work. His talent and his ingenuity extended far beyond his profession. He was an artist, he was a painter, and he was a tinkerer. He loved fixing things, whether it was a Swiss watch, a washing machine, or one of his incredible homemade kites. And my dad hated waste, and working in RAF maintenance units meant there was always surplus stuff being chucked out. I'm sure my sisters remember Dad's homemade greenhouses crafted from old bits of Dexian angle iron and heavy military-grade polythene sheeting, quick to construct, easy to maintain. And together with a few split bamboo canes and leftover poly sheeting, he'd build one of his legendary jumbo kites. Now, I've always been grateful to my dad for convincing me that algebra and geometry were not something to fear. He always helped me with my homework, and although his knowledge ran out after O-level, he left me with enough self-belief and confidence to go on to pursue a career in proper grown-up electronic engineering. He was proud of his 5 children, his 6 grandchildren, and his 3 great-grandchildren. And he celebrated all our achievements as if they were his own. My dad was a great lover of David Attenborough's wildlife documentaries, but not all wildlife found favour with him, and he made an exception for the squirrels that invaded his back garden. Unfortunately, the squirrels proved to be a worthy adversary. My dad kept a catapult made with military-grade aluminium and 1/4-inch rubber for the sole purpose of squirrel deterrence. The squirrels proved to be too swift, and Dad's unguided missile only succeeded in taking out one of his own French windows. So unfortunately, on that occasion, there were squirrels 1 and Dad 0. He cherished his time tinkering and repairing, always striving for perfection. Now, while I've inherited his love of fixing things, I can't say I've inherited his success rate. My sisters and I and the grandkids have probably all experienced taking something you've just completed to show Dad. He would always acknowledge your great achievement, but he'd always remind you that you'd missed a bit. But worse still, he'd go on to correct it for you. So it was best not to get too complacent with your projects. And my dad's legacy is one of resilience, ingenuity, and love. He showed us that with dedication and passion, we could accomplish anything. He taught us the value of family, hard work, and adaptability. My dad's spirit will always be part of us. Every time we pick up a tool to fix something, or to improvise, or admire a piece of art, we'll feel his presence and his influence. Thank you, Dad, for everything, for being our guide, our teacher, our inspiration, and a constant source of love. Thank you, Dad, for teaching us how to be adaptable and honourable and caring. I'd like to finish with an expression that my daughter Calypso always uses. In the shadows are where all the diamonds are. Thank you, Dad, for being the salt of the earth and a real diamond geezer. Your memory lives on.
Wow.
That's
absolutely fantastic tribute by you, Dad, and indeed, I would say on behalf of your siblings as well.
Oh, they've been absolutely brilliant. My sisters are so organised and such a team. I feel bad that I didn't refer to them often enough in the eulogy, but it was very much a personal.
Yes, and I understand that. And from where I'm sitting, and I'm sure the people listening, there's good amount of involvement in there to encompass the whole, everybody.
Yeah.
And, you know, it's not often you hear such a tribute from a child to a parent. You know, you hear quite the opposite many times more than such. So for the listeners, and I can say I'm one, it's absolutely fantastic to see and hear and learn all about your dad and his achievement, and indeed what he's passed on to you, which is very significant, really, you know, because when we look at especially fathers, sometimes they are missing, aren't they?
Yeah.
In a family unit, where you spoke so highly of your mother, who are often the matriarchs.
She was a tough cookie, bless her. Yeah.
But you could, as you quite rightly said, they were a good match, because they both carried their own side of things to make the whole marriage whole. So fantastic. And thank you very much for reading that and agreeing to do that, because I do firmly believe that a lot of people will get a lot from hearing that.
Okay.
Absolutely. Yeah. Brilliant. Yeah. So this has been a wonderful journey that you've taken us on, really. The listeners, no matter what, they will get something from this, and which is what the Forgotten Generation is all about, you know, sharing stories like this. And I'm sure that if and when you get your children and grandchildren to listen to this, you know, I'm sure they'll probably learn something from it as well.
I think they will. Yeah.
Which is fantastic. Have you got any questions at all about the Forgotten Generations?
I don't know, really. I mean, I guess I'm assuming it's not unusual that someone like my dad didn't really share a lot of their wartime experiences. Have you found that's the same with other guys who, you know?
Yes, and by and large, it is a story, and it's not just military.
Yeah.
It's the elderly folks, whether it's coming from, way back when people weren't allowed to discuss their journey.
That's a good point. Yeah.
From slavery days, if you like.
Yeah.
That sort of unconsciously, subconsciously has traveled with us down the years, many people.
Yeah.
So I think now people are learning more to say, you should share things with your children because it's very important, So
yeah.
that's why the forgotten generation say, let's hear it from dad or mom, what the children may not have heard, and then share it with the children because it's recorded forever.
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
I
mean, there's so much stuff I've learned about my dad as a result of my sisters sitting him down and just getting him to talk about, what happened in his youth. It's such an eye opener.
Yeah, and it makes quite a difference when you learn. And it's not just learning about from my experience of doing this, it's not just learning about your parents, it's also learning about you and your siblings.
Yes.
Your story is your story. And even though you're siblings, you go on different paths. So when you record your story, they'll be saying, wow, I didn't know that about Rob. And all of that. That's what I've found with other people that I've done this with.
Yeah.
So it's fabulous, really. And going forward, we have these stories because they go further than the family. They go into educational establishments and to help to say, yes, this is what, people from the Caribbean or Africa have done.
Yeah.
It's all, and education is key because a lot of people don't know these things.
Yeah.
They're influenced by the public, the media, who normally portrays negativity.
And you never see the individual's view of that life, that time, that piece of history. It's that's the one thing that I'd like to pass on to my grandson, really. History is so important. Understanding where you've come from and to understand what's happening in the world at the moment. Even you've got to look back to you've got to look back 100 years. And
fantastic. And if we can change the national curriculum to reflect, Black history permanently on a permanent basis, then as opposed to just October, 1 month of the year, that's also quite essential. Because education is key right across the board. The more I know about you, the more you know about me, and et cetera, in the wider world, from Black to white to whoever, then the more we learn to respect each other. But it's a learning curve, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's very important. So I'm going to say a big thank you for this interview. It's been marvelous.
Thank you for inviting me to talk. I'm sorry if I've rabbited on a bit, but that's the way I am. But,
no, not at all. That's exactly what the interview is all about, because people need to say,
No, I do. I'd really appreciate it. I feel quite honoured, really, to sort of be able to add to the whole project, really, and give my.
And I'm the one that feels honoured. So that's a great way to say to bring this to a conclusion, really. And thank you very much. And we hope that this will reach the eyes and ears of many and benefit those that will be benefited by it.
Yeah, I hope so as well. Yeah.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you.
Thank you, Donald. All the best.
So, thank you. So, ladies and gentlemen, this has been a fantastic journey with Rob Crawford, and I hope that you get something from it. So until the next time, take care.
Goodbye.